Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me, one of the most censored people in the country, for this hour. I'll be with you for the hour. We're gonna hold hands and we're gonna get through this. Okay. Thank you for being here. I have a huge guest for this hour. I'm not gonna speak to it for the whole hour. I'll be doing some other stories as well. But you know her quite well, probably by this point. Tara Reade, Joe Biden's accuser. And it's not like it just popped up recently. She has accused him of the same thing since the 1990s of sexual assault. And now the update, though, what has changed is that she is now stuck in Russia. She is a refugee in Russia. And I know many people have questions about that. They say to her, why Russia? Why now? All those good things. I mean, they're not good things. I mean, all those good questions, all those fair questions they pose to her. And we will be getting to all of that. She has told me she will be a few minutes late, so she'll be here in a few minutes. But thank you for being here. Please click subscribe if you haven't already. Follow, thumbs up, all of those things. And thanks for making this possible, for me to bring you the stuff the mainstream media really don't want you to know. Thank you for doing that. But we will start out. I'll start out with a couple other stories. Oh, I'll also be bringing you in this hour. I'll also be bringing you my exclusive footage of Ben of Ben and Jerry's. Here's the thing. His name's Ben Cohen. I think he needs to change his name to Ben of Ben and Jerry's, because you can't. You have to say it. You have to. You can never speak of Ben and just say Ben. You have to say Ben. Yeah, Ben and Jerry's. You have to say Ben, the ice cream guy. So unless he's going to change his middle name to the ice cream guy, he's got to change it to Ben of Ben and Jerry's. It's the only way for him, I feel like, to get by at this point. And I want good things for him. I want him to achieve something in his life and for his career to go well. So I think he's got to do that. But my exclusive footage of Ben Cohen and Jody Evans, co-founder of Code Pink, getting arrested at the Justice Department just a few days ago. I was there. I asked them questions, and you will see the extended kind of interview that went on in front of the Justice Department before their arrest for daring to come down to the Justice Department and saying that they should free Julian Assange, one of the greatest journalists and publishers this world has ever seen. And for that they were arrested. So I will be showing you that as well coming up in not too long. But while we're waiting for Tara Reade to arrive, and hopefully her internet is good enough, I wanted to get to a few other major stories. This one, I've talked a lot in the recent months, years, all those things about the waning power of the petrodollar and the U.S. cooing countries that threaten the dollar and threaten our ability to steal the resources. So this is big news. Bolivia has forged, and they said they were going to do this. There's been talk of this, but it has now happened. Forged lithium extraction partnerships with China and Russia. Lithium has become the new oil, right? It's become the new thing that is required for all of our phones, all of our computers, so that we can say dumb things to each other at any hour of the day, which I clearly is the best use of that technology. So we can send eggplant emojis at 2 a.m., because there was a time in this world. I know a lot of us don't realize this because we've just grown up in it, especially if you're younger than me, just grown up in it. There was a time in this world where if you had a thought that you wanted to send an eggplant emoji or a little pile of shit emoji to someone across the country, you had to draw it, first of all, freehand, put it in a mail carrier. A guy on a donkey or a horse, I guess a horse, would go across the entire country to then bring that piece of paper with the little hand-drawn eggplant to the person. It wouldn't get there in the middle of the night like you intended for it to. It would get there 3 months later, if you're lucky. It would have a bloody handprint on it from some unrelated incident along the way. It'd be a different mail carrier because 2 of them had died. It was just a whole other thing. Now we can do that instantaneously because of lithium. And so But the thing is, the United States doesn't really have lithium. We have to steal it or buy it, offer they couldn't refuse, kind of buy it from other countries. And one of the big ones is Bolivia. And now Bolivia, we did coup them partially for this lithium reason. We couped them a couple of years ago, and like a year and a half. And then after a year or less than a year, they were able to undo their coup. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes coups are undoable. And they undid their coup that we helped manifest, and they put the socialist leftist leaders back in power. And now they are creating extraction partnerships. Now, I will say this is horrific for the planet, right? Lithium extraction, most of the extraction that any of us, any nations do for various things, most of it is terrible for the planet. However, that being said, it should still be, if it's going to happen, it should still be, the profit should still go to the Bolivian people rather than being stolen by large corporations and the United States and multinationals. And so the fact that that they're able to do this, they're able to get money for their people, and now they're able to forge partnerships with also with other countries. They're talking about creating a lithium OPEC, basically a lithium partnership where they could control the prices and pressure the United States in a way the United States is not really used to being pressured. It speaks to their sovereignty. It speaks to their people and their ability to have freedom and have freedom of choice and freedom of life. And they obviously need a lot of money and large countries to be able to do this. So it makes sense that they would forge partnerships with Chinese and Russian companies. So they've recently entered into agreements for the extraction of lithium from two of the country's salt flats, signed on Thursday, June 29th. These agreements grant authorization to China's CITIC Guoan and Russia's Uranium One group to deploy direct lithium extraction technologies for lithium exploration in Bolivia with a total investment of $1.4 billion. A previous agreement worth a similar value had already been signed in January with the Chinese consortium CATL, BRUNP, and CMOC CBC. Jesus Christ, that's too many initials. So it's one of those things where I wish that we didn't live in a capitalist world where you had to sell your resources in order to have enough money to take care of your people. And in order to do that, you had to extract it in these horrible ways. I would love to live in that world. We don't at the moment live in that world, but maybe we'll get there any minute now, and this won't be necessary. However, I also understand that is the world we live in. And so the fact that they're not doing this under, the IMF, World Bank, US thumb is really important. And this is an important shift that is going on in the world right now, that these countries are even able to make these deals, that they even have the ability to sign a deal with China to have these things done is a huge shifting of the geopolitical power center of this world. And it needs to happen, or else you have just the U.S. empire crushing countries, doing whatever they want. And the U.S. empire has shown again and again and again and again and again and again. And then when you're like, they can't do it again, they do it again and again, that they are only willing and only ever looking for profit. Russia's $600 million investment represents the first significant foreign venture in lithium production by the Russian state nuclear energy corporation Rosatom, with Uranium One group being one of its members. So there you have another major change in shift in this world and how things are operating. So I wanted to bring you that story because they won't really tell you that on mainstream media. They won't really mention these things that are major changes in the world around us. So exciting news on that front. For those of you just showing up, Tara Reid should be with us shortly. She will be coming to us from Russia, from Moscow. I know Russia's a little vague. Where she is now as she says, kind of stuck because she feels she cannot come back to the United States. And she will be explaining to us why that is the case. But she is running a little late. So let's get to one more story. This is from Responsible Statecraft. And they're not, I think this is important because this is not a like leftist mag. This is not a Jane Fonda circa Vietnam mag. By the way, how do you go from like sitting on a tank protesting the U.S. war in Vietnam to marrying the creator of CNN? Like, to me, those seem like very, very different things. I don't really understand how she's lived a lot of roles over the years. But so Responsible Statecraft is not a leftist magazine. It's not known for hippie pinko thought. But it is also known for, being reasonable, being a little more reasonable in the U.S. empire geopolitical take and viewpoints than our psychopathic, quote unquote, leaders. And so it's good to learn what the the middle road is now saying about the war in Ukraine and what's going on there. And this is a fascinating article that could also shift could signal a shift in the U.S. mainstream, in the Beltway class, as they say in D.C. The war in Ukraine is at a dangerous crossroads. The outcome on the battlefield is increasingly tied to the political survival and prestige of all principal warring parties, including President Joe Biden, who is on the verge of crossing more self-imposed lines on arms transfers. They're referring to cluster bombs, of course, which is horrific. Cluster bombs are. But this is an important point, that it's now, the proxy war in Ukraine has now become increasingly linked to the political futures of too many people. Like, Joe Biden needs to show we, quote unquote, won in our proxy war. Zelensky obviously needs to win in the proxy war. There's various other NATO countries that have aligned on this proxy war that now need to show movement and need to show winning. So that's how many people are going against peace, going against ending this thing because it's tied to their political futures. Kiev, meanwhile, is in the middle of an underwhelming offensive that it's been previously told may mark the end of U.S. military aid. All the while, a ceasefire is publicly rejected by leaders who cast it as unacceptable. No, we can't possibly stop this insanity. We can't possibly stop it. We need, just give us just a few more weeks of insanity. If we could just go all out, fucking Hamburger Hill, people churned up in the gears of war for just like another few months, and then we'll figure something out. I mean, it is horrific. It's horrific on all sides. And it's just like, yeah, let's not even give peace a moment of a chance. Give peace a chance. Didn't you hear the song? That was a song. But giving peace a chance or something. It's in this context that top Ukrainian officials charge of Moscow, or the top Ukrainian officials have charges. It's in this context that top Ukrainian officials charges, their charges of Moscow orchestrating, this is a poorly worded sentence, Moscow orchestrating an impending nuclear catastrophe. I talked a little about this on a previous live stream about Ukraine is now saying, oh, they're gonna blow up that nuclear power plant to try to send radiation through all of Europe, because that makes a lot of sense. Of all the things Russia has done and looks like they would want to do you think irradiating their own country, because let's be honest, it's not only going to send radiation into Europe, so irradiating their own country, their own, and half of Europe, that would be really useful to them right now. That would really serve a big purpose. cited alleged intelligence. So Zelensky cited alleged intelligence to announce that Russia was, quote, technically ready to provoke a local explosion at the Zaporizhia. There's too many Z's, okay? Look, there's not a lot we can agree on in this world, but we can agree there's too many Z's in that goddamn word. Nuclear power plant, which has been controlled by Russian forces since March last year. Zelensky's claim was uncritically broadcast in headlines from American news outlets. What a surprise! The American news media, including all those little stooges, were willing to run around spouting lies. They all uncritically reported it. They don't, not for a moment do they think, because it's true. Doesn't matter. Okay, folks, I want to jump. Maybe I'll come back to this afterwards, but I want to jump to our interview because I know she has limited time, but I'm excited to have Tara Reade on and to speak to her again. It's been quite a while, and her situation has changed dramatically recently. And so I wanted to get those facts to you and to give her time to explain to everyone why it is, what has happened, and why she is now basically stuck in Russia. And without further ado, please welcome Tara Reade.
Hi.
Hey, how are you? I mean,
I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good.
I guess I mean
connecting.
I guess I mean today, as opposed to I know how are you generally. There's a lot of issues, but
yeah.
But so thank you so much for joining. I know it is difficult, time zones and internet connection and all of that stuff. So I really do appreciate it. I think pretty much everyone that's watching right now knows who you are, knows that you have had the same accusations against Joe Biden since the 1990s. And it was largely ignored. I mean, it continues to be ignored in many ways, but it was largely ignored until his run for the presidency. And now a lot more people know of you. And you, of course, also have a book. You've had a radio show. And now you are stuck in Russia. And I wanted basically for you to be able to speak to why it is, how you ended up there, and many people want an answer to the question of why Russia, because I know that they say, oh well, maybe she was scared, but why go to Russia? So anyway, I want to let you address all of that.
Well, thank you, Lee. It's so nice to see you. And just so you know, apparently with StreamYard, I needed a VPN and I didn't have it set up right, so. We don't get StreamYard here. It gets Zoom, but not StreamYard. So I'm learning Russia.
I didn't know that at all, although I had that problem when I went to China. I was there for 4 days, and I didn't realize I could not use anything. So I had to fix it all, but yeah.
Yeah. So it's, you know how it is when you're traveling, you learn as you go, right? We learn as we go. So, to answer your question, yeah, I came here to oversee the translation of my book. I was going to be here and sightsee and be here for a little over a week or just a week. And I packed that way too, and didn't pack a coat and didn't pack things I needed for a long haul stay. And and then I started getting information from people that were telling me that it would not be safe for me to go back to the US, and that I might be facing Interpol red notices, which is arrest warrants for those who may not know, and that I was possibly in violation of sanctions. And because I accepted a plane ticket from Channel One, which is a channel here, and I was on Maria Butina's show. Masha is a friend of mine, and I've had her on my show a couple of times to talk about prison conditions in the U.S.
Let's just throw in here that she was arrested by the U.S. and how long was she in prison here?
About 14 months or a little longer, and in solitary for 4.5 months in brutal conditions.
So she was really treated as a political prisoner here in the U.S.
Right. And, there's a great article if people want to read it about that. It's called The Spy Who Wasn't. if you look it up in Maria Butina, you can, it really kind of lays it out. She was kind of like thrown under the bus by Republicans, basically. She was kind of involved with the pro-gun movement and was swept up with that. But she was here to go to school and to, learn political science. She has a love for America, or she did. And she, even after what happened to her, she still has a lot of compassion for Americans, but she doesn't like the leadership, obviously, that put her in prison, and the way that happened, and the Russophobia and all of that. So, she basically, I went, yeah, very good. I'm glad you have that article up. I talked to Masha when I was here. She, of course, is a member now of the State Duma, a very powerful person, and does a lot for people who are in trouble, and political prisoners. Doesn't matter what the reasons are, she helps people. And I kind of told her what was going on, and she can't give advice because she is part of the State Duma, but she had concerns too. I mainly made my decision by Americans. Americans were, former intelligence gave me some information that I might be arrested when I came back. I have a sealed case, Lee, which we talked about before, where a grand jury was impaneled, and that is still sitting there, sort of like a spider.
And you're not allowed to find out what's in that at all.
No, it's still sealed. Kind of like what happened to Julian Assange. I don't want to compare myself to Julian. I'm not a whistleblower of his magnitude, but he had a case like that for 10 years, and then they indicted him. So mine's been for 3 years. It's sitting there sealed. And my attorney tried to get information, could not. And then I talked to Matt Gaetz, who is a member of Congress. And we had a phone conversation while I was in Moscow. And he basically told me that he felt he was concerned for my physical safety. So at that point, I had to make a decision. And I decided to stay in Moscow. And it was a very difficult decision. It was heart-wrenching. I have a grown daughter, and I have family, and I have pets. And it was sudden. I didn't have things with me that I would need to move here. I didn't have access to money, very practical things. It was really, I can't describe to you what it's like. And the anger that I feel is pretty intense, because as you know, Lee, I worked for Joe Biden in 1993. He raped me. I was his staff member. I tried to report it. That report is sealed. And in fact, 2 days ago or 3 days ago, a verdict came out from the state Supreme Court of Delaware saying that the complaint I filed and other filings are not being released because it's not in the public interest. So they're staying sealed. So here I am, wanting to testify before Congress about what Biden did to me, wanting an investigation. But instead, I'm being portrayed as a villain. So he rapes me, I'm the villain because I went to Russia. I went to Russia, like I said, to oversee the translation of the book. But then once here, I felt safe. And Matt Gaetz told me he was concerned for my physical safety and could not guarantee my physical safety. And what a thing for a U.S. congressman to tell a U.S. citizen, right?
Yeah.
And there's several other whistleblowers that don't feel safe either, that are trying to testify against Biden. One is doing it from some unknown location, I guess. Another one is dead, and another one is in hiding. And we're in a mafia state, Lee. We're in a mafia state right now.
And so you didn't think it would get to this level, I assume, because obviously you'd seen attacks on your character, all this garbage media and everything, but you had continued. You put out a book, you had a radio show, and you still, at least to some degree, felt safe enough to be in the United States until recently.
Yeah, I thought it was I noticed that I was getting increased death threats again, like I did in 2020. And in 2020, I also got threatened by Biden's, incels, with prison for perjury. I had to hire a lawyer and clear my name. I didn't commit perjury. And so that was overhanging me for a while. And then, I've had everything thrown at me by this machine, by the Democratic National Committee. And they operate to silence, terrorize, and whatever. And something that no one knows publicly, I haven't talked about this publicly, Lee, but I will right now. 2 weeks ago, my horse was almost stolen, because the person said, called the owner of the ranch and said I was a traitor to the United States, that I was in Russia.
Wow.
I didn't deserve my horse. They pulled up a trailer and tried to take my horse. And
Wow.
I've owned him for almost 9 years. I'm paying for him to be at a boarding stable. He's with my family. He has a trainer with him 3 days a week. He's a very well taken care of horse. He's very pampered, and I love him. And that was shocking. Sheriff got involved. My horse is safe. He's been moved to a safe location. But then my daughter, 3 days ago, was doxxed by Democratic trolls that have been following me since 2020. They put her photo up, her address where she works, and started, trying to egg people on to go to her workplace. My daughter is a private person. She's not involved with politics. She never posts anything. She's very private. And so this was, again, just a tactic to terrorize me. And for why, I don't know, because I'm not even able to testify. I'm here in Russia. So I don't know what their objective is.
God, that's horrifying. No, I mean, I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine getting stuck somewhere with such little notice and not being able to tend to your pets, your family, your life. And then on top of that, to throw in that people are threatening those sacred things is incredibly tough. And I'm so sorry for your situation. I see that in this NPR article, one of the few articles that even, there's some coverage of this, but really relatively little about you. But in this NPR article, they say that National Security spokesperson John Kirby was asked about it, and he said basically no comment. But then he said the fact that her life is at risk by the U.S. government is absolutely false, baseless. There's nothing to that. Is that the only response that the Biden government has given to this?
Apparently, there was a couple of press conferences by the NSA, which is kind of chilling in itself. And it really, if John Kirby tells you you're safe, you pretty much can know that the opposite is true, right?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
His job is propaganda.
Yeah. So, I talked with my human rights lawyer, who was very concerned. Apparently, I had a FISA case opened in 2019 against me. So this has been ongoing for a long time. Right when I came forward, the reason I keep speaking out and the reason I'm taking the risks that I am to speak out is because this can't happen to another person. Biden can't operate like the mafia. This has to stop. The money laundering in Ukraine, the proxy war against Russia, all of it. I mean, my case is important to me, of course, and to people who love me, but on a bigger scale, Biden is my monster, but he's become the world's monster. We are close to nuclear annihilation because of this insane administration and the people around him. Jake Sullivan, Anthony Blinken, Victoria Nuland, who, everywhere she goes, there's a coup, right? And I mean, these people are sociopathic at this point about the money that they're reaping from the military industrial complex. And I've been very outspoken about all of it. And because I've been outspoken against this proxy war against Russia, while the Americans are wanting and NATO wanting to fight to the last Ukrainian, right? And then now, you have news where they're suddenly what they called a war crime last year by Jen Psaki. They're going to be sending these munitions that, these bombs.
Cluster bombs, yeah.
Yeah. And that will end up hurting civilians and children. So I've been very outspoken about all of this because I feel passionately anti-war, Lee, as you do. I spoke at Rage Against the War Machine. But because I spoke out, it's more than just me coming forward about Biden. It's because I spoke out against the proxy war. That's why I've been targeted the way I have. And, other journalists have been targeted. I have met here, Lee, I've met people from Ireland, from England, from America that are seeking asylum in Russia because they told the truth about the proxy war. And now their governments want to imprison them. And Germany as well. Yeah. And Alina Lipp. Example, Che Bose, example. I mean, Chris Ems, another example. These people are having to get asylum in Russia and get protection because their own governments, where they're from, are trying to persecute them and put them in prison for a long time.
Yeah, and we've seen just in the past few weeks, Matt Taibbi has had the IRS weaponized against him. The Democrats also said maybe he should be arrested for his testimony in front of Congress. The IRS opened a file on him the day he reported the Twitter files, and then they raided his home the day he testified in front of Congress. So I don't think you can get more obvious than that, than having to, as proof that the government is in various ways being weaponized against journalists and against whistleblowers. We've seen that. That's been ongoing through Trump, through the Obama administration. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, I mean, the Biden administration is just giving the big middle finger right now. I mean, like just the blatant corruption, the blatant money laundering, and no one's doing anything about it. I don't know, Lee, what the total answer is. I've kind of given up hope with the election integrity right now. My concern is, will there even be a free, fair election, right? And who will be the candidate, you know? Because if Biden can't make it, they'll just throw in Gavin Newsom. But you're going to have the same warmongers around that administration. So
yeah, and you know, I feel you see the same from both parties. It's largely pro-war. It's largely, there's been essentially zero debate of what's been sent to Ukraine, over $100 billion of weaponry and other kind of money. And like you said, there's just endless corruption. Seymour Hersh reported on $400 million that's been pilfered by Zelensky and others that even the CIA was getting concerned about. That's coming from Seymour Hersh. But back to your story, a lot of people want to know why Russia, and is it simply that it was where you got trapped and you knew that there's only so many countries that are willing to fight U.S. extradition? I mean, there really aren't that many on the planet that will stand up to the U.S.
I think there's 3. So Iran, Russia, and, you know, I think one other. So, yeah, I mean, I happen to be in Russia, but, you know, I don't want to make it sound like it's a horrible experience, because truth be told, Lee, it's beautiful here. The city is clean. The people are 80 to 90%. I've been studying this, of Muscovites, you know, but not just Muscovites, but Russians, young people, right? 80 to 90% can own their own apartments outright, not like a mortgage, but outright, plus a dasha. It's very normal for just someone who's working for like a TV cable company to own their own apartment and have a dasha as well, outright. Education, you can go through like a master's degree for what's equivalent to $5,000, and it is a good education. I mean, the people that I talk to are very educated with literature, a very well-rounded liberal educations as far as that goes, you know, music, literature, history, very, very, you know, sophisticated.
I mean, Americans are pretty well-rounded on what happened in the Marvel movies.
Exactly.
So, that.
And you know, what I'm noticing is the food is better. Monsanto's banned here. Putin actually gave money to farmers to do organic. Because he saw what was happening in the West and all the health issues. So he decided to put money into that. So I noticed the difference because I lived on a farm when I was a little girl in Wisconsin, and the food tastes like when I was a little girl. You can taste things.
I was talking about this the other day that, I mean, I don't know how it is in Russia, but I was talking about it the other day that I remember growing up, I used to love cucumbers. And then sometime in the 90s, I stopped liking them because they all tasted like, I didn't know it at the time, but they taste like pesticide or chemicals or something. And now I've refound an enjoyment of certain vegetables if you get the far higher priced, organic, not pesticide free, you know, I mean, pesticide free kind of, but you have to pay a lot more and everything. So the kinds that are just kind of out there everywhere are so filled with pesticides, they don't taste like they did when you were a kid.
Exactly. Like when I walked into a grocery store, I walked in not knowing, right? And so I was asking someone who spoke English for the organic section. They said, everything's organic. And I was like, what? And they're like, yeah, we don't allow pesticides. It's not allowed. And it's not, you know, and Monsanto's banned. And I didn't know that. The other thing that's really interesting are you know, how much Russophobia there is in America and how these stereotypes. The people that are here are so warm and so happy to hear English, and they're like excited. So when I ask for help, they like stop what they're doing and like, oh, you're Amerikansky, you're from America, and they're like genuinely warm and happy. They don't have that animosity towards us, and it kind of hurts my heart in a way to see, you know, because, you know, unfortunately in America there's a lot of, you know, a lot of Russophobia and a lot of stereotypes. And there's just this earnestness and innocence here. Now, bear in mind, Russia's capitalist, right? So they're at the beginning, they're in their honeymoon period. You know, America right now is experiencing crony capitalism. We're at the end cycle. So, you know, hopefully
late
Russia
stage.
takes a different path. Yeah. So I don't know how long Russia will be in this kind of nice kind of, but it sort of feels like when I was a kid in the 80s, right? Even though we were doing horrible things and having horrible foreign adventures at home, things weren't as dire as they are now, you know?
That's all very fascinating, and I don't doubt that even things must taste but different with the pesticides and the chemicals banned. I did a video just a few weeks ago about how people think Monsanto's gone because it was bought by Bayer, but basically all of it still exists. It just has a new name now that it was bought by a company that was created by Nazis. But anyway, so it's all still there. It just has a new name. But let's see. One other question I wanted to get to is: do you feel there's going to be updates on your case? Is there an effort to get more information on that sealed indictment? Is it just feel like everything's frozen?
Absolutely. We've done FOIAs. We're doing FOIAs. My attorney is. He filed with my attorney, John Levy, and I have Rhoda Sterling, who is amazing. They filed with the UN for my violation of human rights and my right to free speech. But you know, they could take up to a year to answer. I don't know. Yeah. As far as the red notices, I'll know in a couple of months, like what countries have them, who didn't, who did. And because of my temporary asylum, they'll have to pull those red notices. I may not be able to cross the border for a long time. I'm kind of assimilating this, Lee. And I'll be honest with your audience. I'm still processing what's happened because it's shocking. Like to be somewhere and then be told, you know, you can walk into a cage or you can maybe die. These are your choices, or you can stay here and be safe. And it's like, okay. And so I'm still processing that. And I have a lot of anger at the Biden administration because he committed a crime. He covered it up. He won't be investigated. And I'm the bad guy. I'm being called the traitor. I'm being called the person who, you know, defected, which is a weird word because I'm not military. So how could I defect?
Right. And in some ways, it's almost even more painful to see it coming from the mainstream media because they're not a player in it, like supposedly. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, Biden lying to defend himself is one form of, psychopathy or sociopathy. But the mainstream media, they're supposed to just report the story. And how do you feel they reported on you versus the accusations against Donald Trump?
Oh, my gosh. Do I have a perfume line? Like Stormy Daniels? Do I have a Vogue cover? Or do I have New Yorker cover like E. Jean Carroll and all the reporters like just at her feet, just, you know, talking about how Me Too and everything? Silence when it comes to me. And you know what, Lee? It's not just the mainstream media. What about Max Blumenthal? What about Aaron Mate? What about all the left media that used me as clickbait? Where are they? Why aren't they talking about my story? Why aren't they talking about me? They're not. Katie Halper, silence. And I love these people and I raise up their work, but right now I need them. Where are they?
Really? I was unaware that there was silence on
silence. There's just silence. It's like I don't exist because they're so scared, right? I think it's fear. I think everyone's so scared. Well, I'm not scared anymore. I'm here. And all I can tell you is that that's no way to live. And you know what you're doing is very brave, Lee, because a lot of people won't have me on their show. They won't do it because I'm in Moscow, simply because I'm in Moscow. And they won't even talk about the story. But you know, like, we need to push back on the left media and say, what the hell are you doing? Report on the story. There, you have someone who's been outspoken, who's a whistleblower, who is trapped and who can't testify before Congress about a crime that took place. And I mean, that's a story. And why isn't the left media all over it? You tell me, Lee.
I wish I knew the answer. Yeah, I mean, so they definitely, certain people, I'm not speaking to anyone specifically, but certain people are afraid of guilt by association. I know I dealt with a lot of that back when I was with RT, and maybe some even now, but even though I haven't been there in a long time, but simply being, you know, even though I was completely uncensored and wrote all my own stuff, simply being connected to RT America, people are afraid to have me on, afraid to interview me, and they're just afraid of guilt by association. And it really is, right. You want to see some spine. You want to see these people stand up and present the truth, no matter who it's coming from. But yeah, I am sorry to hear that, and I definitely hope that changes. And
well, we got to call them out. We got to call them out. We got to call them out right now. And all as we move forward with this election, and stop talking about the lesser of two evils, because, you know, I don't want to hear that from a Democrat's mouth. I don't want to hear that coming out of a neoliberal's mouth, because the lesser of two evil is evil, and that's it. Like, let's not go back to that, like what we did in 2020, where they're talking about Biden, you know, lesser of two evils, right?
Yeah, and now we're at the brink of nuclear war, thanks to him. So, well, thank you so much. I know it's late there. Yeah, I would definitely love to speak to you in the future, although I hope your situation gets much better to the point you don't even have to do interviews. But thank you for joining me, and keep us updated, and hang in there.
Yeah, thank you, Lee. It was so good to talk to you again. Take good care.
Absolutely. Bye. All right, there is Tara Reade. Thank you so much for joining me in this, and for joining me to hear her story, her side of things, why she is currently in Russia, and does not feel it's safe to come back to the United States. It is a gripping and scary reality that, I don't know, that someone could be treated like that someone could fear for their safety like that. And we claim to be this, you know, this moral, upright country. And of course, it's all bullshit when actually push comes to shove. I want to get to another important story I wanted to bring you, which is, this is exclusive footage of Ben Cohen of Ben and Jerry's, and Jody Evans, co-founder of Code Pink. Medea Benjamin was also there, but I didn't get a chance to speak with her on camera. But getting arrested in front of the Justice Department in order to, they're protesting the treatment of Julian Assange. And, you know, obviously there's quite a segue here, right? Tara Reade is in Russia fleeing what she feels is U.S. persecution, what she's heard, what she's been told is U.S. persecution, because she very well could end up in a kangaroo court situation, locked up the way Julian Assange has. So Julian Assange has shown what the U.S. is capable of. They're capable of locking up one of the best publishers and journalists this world has ever seen, literally never publishing anything wrong, anything incorrect, anything retractable in the entire history of WikiLeaks. They can lock him up and torture him basically for 11 years now, and with impunity. They act like there's no reason they should have to answer for it. So that is why Ben Cohen of Ben and Jerry's, and Jody Evans, of co-founder of Code Pink. Code Pink, of course, the excellent anti-war organization that's been around for years and years. One of the few anti-war organizations that is always there and in your face and demanding a stop to it all. But so I'm going to show this clip. This is my footage again. I was there. Part of it, I'll let you know what it is. A part of it, I asked some questions of Ben. And I'm going to, play it for you, and occasionally interrupt far too much, as I'm known to do, and say things as we go. It's 8 minutes long, but, with interruptions, it'll last longer. But this is just the other day.
That wants to show us the cost of war, so we are enraged to work for peace.
By the way, the audio. So there's a huge crowd of people there. Luckily, there was a bunch of reporters, and I am in them trying to get my camera as close as possible with a shotgun mic and all that stuff. However, the audio is still rather low, and I tried to filter out background noise. If I'm hoping you guys can hear it enough that it's feasible. If it really is impossible to hear anything, then let me know that, because that would be silly to show you something you can't hear at all. But hopefully it's not impossible.
Instead, the costs of war are denied us. Instead, he's imprisoned and silenced. We cannot silence the truth. Just since the collateral murder video, $20 trillion of U.S. taxpayer money has been used on weapons and violence and war, and it comes home to the streets. When you put someone in solitary confinement, that is torture. That is torture by the UN.
She just mentioned a second ago, she just mentioned the $20 trillion that has been spent just since the global war on terror began. And that is $20 trillion, not counting the 21 trillion of unaccounted for adjustments that have been found in the Pentagon books. It's actually over that now. It's closer to 35 trillion that has been unaccounted for adjustments in the Pentagon's books. So she's talking about just the, like, we actually are admitting we spent this money stuff coming out of the Pentagon. Just the stuff they're like, yeah, that happened. Just that stuff is $20 trillion since the global war on terror began. For those of you who missed it, this is Jody Evans, the co-founder of Code Pink.
It's been said, when you do that, you silence others. What does that say to our children? What does that say to the children that we put people in jail for telling the truth?
That's Ben on the ground. In a moment, he turns around.
Telling the truth, and it's not just 4 years in solitary confinement. It's 10 years confined for telling the truth.
I want to go into the Department of Justice and talk to them about how they're criminalizing free speech and freedom of the press. It's not the Department of Justice if they're criminalizing freedom of the press.
And by the way, notice the sheer number of cops that were required to deal with two people sitting gently, sitting unharmed, an old man and a woman in all pink and a sun hat sitting in the doorway of the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. And it took this phalanx of cops with their guns and their badges and their, small penises all standing around. And then there are actually more that maybe there's a shot of them, but there are more off to the right that are slowly amassing to deal with the situation. They had on, those were the DHS looking a little more like SWAT team with Kevlar and bulletproof vests, and they had an extra 4 Big Macs for breakfast that morning just to be ready for this. And you'll see some of them in a moment.
It is kind of hard to believe that it was the Obama-Biden administration that decided not to prosecute Assange.
He just said, in case you couldn't hear it, he just said, it is surprising to know that it was the Obama-Biden administration that chose not to indict Assange. And he means surprising because they are so horrible, and they were so horrible on whistleblowers, that it's surprising they didn't indict Assange back under Obama. But they didn't. They chose not to.
Trump decided to indict him, which was precedent-shattering. And now Biden is following in Trump's direction of this war on truth, war on the press, and at the same time saying that journalism is not a crime. I just feel like the Department of Justice is acting in an unjust fashion, prosecuting a publisher for publishing the truth. I mean, what could be more basic than that?
By the way, it's possible he could have gotten more media attention by just telling everyone he's Bernie Sanders. I mean, could he? I feel like it probably would have had quite an impact if he just said that he's Bernie Sanders. But yeah. But Bernie Sanders didn't get arrested in front of the Justice Department for protesting Assange, the treatment of Assange.
I don't know why they won't let it through, but they won't. I mean, Assange is not even a U.S. citizen, and it's the U.S. that's prosecuting him. I mean, if this stands, if the U.S. is allowed to continue this prosecution, the precedent that it sets is that the U.S. can arrest any journalist of any nationality in any country around the world if they print something that the U.S. doesn't like. I mean, that is exactly the opposite of freedom of the press.
By the way, I just remembered I'm going to continue the rest of this at rumble.com/Lee Camp. There's plenty more footage to come of this, the arrest and the arrest of Jody Evans and Ben Cohen out front of the Justice Department to protest the treatment of Julian Assange. Plenty of more footage to come. So please join me at rumble.com/Lee Camp. It's free to watch there. Obviously, if you're watching at my locals page, that will all stay the same. Here's the link. I'm putting it in the comment thread. Join me over at rumble.com/Lee Camp right now for the rest of this live stream. And I will be going over time today.